the group that everyone wants to be a member of and few qualify. Seriously, it is a group that was formed just last summer, dedicated specifically to instilling fiscal discipline in state government. She champions legislation to restore personal responsibility to the welfare system, reduce regulatory burdens, make government more accountable and transparent, protect consumers, and uphold our constitutional rights. Isn't that what a legislator in fact should do? But so few do. Kristin believes government must work for the people, not the other way around, and she leads by example by taking no pension and no perks. Kristin and her husband Rick reside in York Township. Let's welcome Kristin Phillips-Hill.
Good morning. We're having some technical difficulties here. We're going to try and get me wired with a mic, but it's wonderful to be here with you all today. So as our panelists join us, I want you to think about this. And it's this very, very profound sentence. And it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So good morning. I'm Kristin Phillips-Hill. I'm struggling with my microphone, but I am exceedingly glad to be joined by my dear friends, colleagues, incredible advocates, Mr. Otto Banks from the Reach Alliance, Representative Greg Rothman of the 87th District, Representative Dawn Keefer from the 92nd District, and Warren Hudak, Hudak Accounting, and he is the chairman of the National Federation of Independent Business here in Pennsylvania, Small Business, the Job Creators of Pennsylvania. So, you know, it is said that Thomas Jefferson, when he penned that sentence, created the most potent and consequential words in American history. And I think what we don't realize is that Jefferson took that phrase, the pursuit of happiness, from British philosopher John Locke, who really was the philosophical father of our American Revolution. And Locke believed that since God had given each person the desire to pursue happiness as a law of nature, that the government should not try to interfere with an individual's pursuit of happiness. Now, Representative Rothman's probably going to clarify because we've had this conversation, but I really believe that the pursuit of happiness is the foundation of individual liberty, and that since it gives each of us the ability to make decisions that are in our long-term best interest. The question that we're really here today, pardon me, to answer is, how can the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania assure that each and every person that lives here can pursue their happiness? So, Representative Rothman, did you want to clarify that for?
Well, I was just pointing out that the 18th century definition of happiness is maybe a little different than the 21st century, a lot different than the 21st century definition of happiness. In the 18th century, happiness meant pursuing what was morally right, so or participating in what was morally right, or to do the right thing. So when Locke or Jefferson said pursuit of happiness, they meant that we should all be free as Americans to do the right thing. And sometimes, believe it or not, and Warren can probably help shed some light on this with businesses can't even do the right thing, or the citizens can't do the right thing. So I just wanted to point that out, that this isn't about the like sex, rock and roll, and everybody have fun and no consequences happiness. Sometimes we see it in the 60s or today. Not that we were around in the 60s.
No, absolutely not. None of us were around in the 60s. But so today, I think it would be really helpful if we could touch on some of the reform efforts that we see happening in the legislature across the Commonwealth with regard to education, our business climate, regulations, and welfare. And we know that there's so many good things that are currently underway. I guess if we start with education as sort of the foundation of so much of what we do, Otto, You and I first met back in December of 2015 in a rather unconventional way, right?
Right, absolutely.
It was that frantic last-minute push to save the funding for many of our schools across the Commonwealth as a result of the governor's inaction on the educational improvement tax credit and the opportunity scholarship tax credit. And I thought maybe you could talk about that effort as a way of reforming education and lifting up some of our poorest, most challenged students.
Oh, absolutely. You know, when you first raised the initial point in question, you talked about, you know, Pennsylvania and what serves as our foundation. I was even thinking about even further back. There's Lazarus's poem. Does anyone know the great Colossus? Send me your tired, your poor, you know.
Huddled masses yearning.
Yeah, huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these the homeless toss to me. I lift my torch beside the golden door. See, that golden door is America. It shows the fruitfulness of our country. It's like if you have a belief in hard work and yearning desire, you too can achieve what this great country has to offer. And that's also the foundation that is provided in education. Because if you are given a great education, if you are given an opportunity to realize the true benefits of an education, you will also realize the true benefits of America as well as the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But some throughout Pennsylvania don't have access or equal access to a quality education. That's why the representatives here who've always assisted us and served as a champion when it comes into the area of education, because it continues to support the Education Improvement Tax Credit Program. And what this program does is move people from dependency to self-sufficiency. And that is the root cause. That's the root belief. That is the root. It is the foundation upon which makes our Commonwealth great, is because we have a ready, willing, able, and highly educated workforce. Education, ladies and gentlemen, is the greatest anti-poverty program ever created. You want to look at welfare reform? Start with a great education. You want to look at reduction in correction spending? Start with education. Because I'll tell you what, I've never seen a University of Pennsylvania grad climb through somebody's window. I've never seen a Harvard grad stick someone up at an ATM machine. So if you want to have an impact and change the trajectory of an entire community, what you want to do is ensure they have access to a quality education.
What can we do better? Because we know that EITC and OSTC is exceedingly successful. I see it right home in York County, right? We've got Logos Academy. They're amazing. They're not just lifting up students, but they're lifting up entire families, pulling people out of poverty, providing job and workforce training for parents. And it's so profound and it's so amazing, but we know we can do better. What other steps, what other legislation is out there that could continue down this path?
Well, right now there's Senate Bill 2 with Senator John DeSantos. He has an ESA bill, which is an education savings account. And in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there are 3 streams of revenue that pay for a child's education. There's a federal contribution, there's a state contribution. Of course, many of you that are homeowners, it is your tax dollars that also support the financing of the local education system. Now, with Senator DeSantos' bill, the state contribution will follow the child to the school of his or her choice. So again, it's income neutral. The money's already going to be expended. So what we're doing is saying, you know what? Why don't we give the families the freedom to pursue their own happiness and give them the opportunity to send their child to a great performing school that's going to ensure that they have a successful future.
So backstage, we were having a follow-up conversation to just that very conversation. And Warren shared that his business really struggles to find students who are well-trained to take on the challenges of employment. And that there's a tie-in between workforce training and unemployment.
Well, absolutely. The NFIB has been polling their members more than 50 years. And the usual things pop up to the top of the list: regulatory, healthcare, taxation. But for the first time in our history, the #1 issue and it's dominated national conversation. Next year, NFIB has next week we have our dinner. McMahon from the SBA is coming into town. The number one issue we're dealing with is employment issues. The best way I can describe this problem and phenomenon is you graduate from law school and you spend your days in traffic court and your nights driving a cab to pay the bills. You build up a reputation, and a large firm picks you up and you do wills for them for a while, then trusts, and then corporate work, and eventually you make partner. You're hanging out with the fancy crowd in town, and somebody says you should run for district attorney, and you do. And then somebody says you should be a judge. Our business challenges today, our small businesses challenges, we don't have anybody who wants to work in traffic court, who's able to work in traffic court, who has the skills to work in traffic court. It is a basic skills like being able to take criticism, being able to be corrected, attention to detail, following instructions. Otto said quality education. We have people graduating from school who can't do any of these things. It's scary. To that I say, let's teach cursive again. Not so that you can write cursive. Well, writing cursive is a good thing, but it's more than that. It's the process of learning cursive. Who hasn't written 3 pages of cues, handed it into the teacher in the hopes that she's not going to send it back to you for another 3 or 6 or 10 pages? And when she does, you learn how to take criticism. You learn how to pay attention to detail. These are the things that the kids today, they're graduating from school, whether it be college or high school. A local chamber of commerce here has a program. It's a certificate program for high school graduates. And if you have a certificate from this chamber, it says you went to class, you weren't disruptive, you did your homework. I'm thinking to myself, isn't that a high school diploma? Why the certificate? It's a testament to where we are and the true challenges. Now we get an employee in, and he's eager and he wants to come to work, he's dependable, but he doesn't have the skills. We're not big organizations. A lot of times it's the owner who's doing the training. We pull the owner away from his role as maybe chief IT guy that day, maybe chief tax guy the next day. Now all of a sudden we're pulling him out of his role to do this training. Let me give you some numbers. Cabinet maker. I asked him, how's your hiring going? 1 in 10 work out. A local credit union has a training class of 25 candidates. 6 work out. A large tax practice. Going into the tax season, they hire 80. 20 make it to tax season, 6 make it to the end. It's unbelievable. This is our true challenge. We can do better. We have to not only focus on the money, but we have to focus on the quality. What are we doing? To my dismay, my daughter, 12 years old, has a Chromebook. What? She doesn't need a Chromebook. She doesn't need help with technology. She needs basic skills.
So next week in the House Health Committee, the newly appointed chairman, Kathy Rapp, is going to move Representative Matt Dowling's legislation that would help restore dignity of work to people who are on public assistance, imposing work requirements. But those work requirements would also include job training and education for people who are on Medicaid if they're able-bodied, if they do not have a physical or intellectual disability that would preclude them from working. Is that a good step to address what you're seeing in small business?
It's an awesome step. Small businesses lack the resources of large corporations. At the state capitol, if somebody doesn't show up to work that day, somebody's able to fill in. In a small business, somebody doesn't show up for work today, you either need to make it up or somebody has to work late that day to do it.
Well, I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I want to follow up on Otto's comment. Otto and I were both. We both worked for Jack Kemp. Both big fans of Jack Kemp. Right. And Jack had a little different take on Otto's economic development. He said the greatest economic development plan is a job. And I now that we're in the midst of looking at the money, we spend a ton of our budget, close to 50% on social services and another 40 on education. We're spending a lot of money. The money is a big deal, but to me, it's even worse. We're destroying the spirit of these young people I mean, I started working when I was 11 years old. I got fired from my first job at 11 because I wasn't 12. But I mean, and I think anybody in this room who ever got their first paycheck or who bought their first item with their own money, I mean, there was something about that, you know, we grew up being taught how to work and wanting to work. And I think now we have schools that don't teach kids how to learn. And we have a government social service net programs that teach people not to have to work. And that's, to me, worse than even the money, because that's what's great about America is the work ethic. And what's great about Pennsylvania's got the best labor force in the nation. But we need our young people to come up and appreciate that all work is big.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I can tell you that we hear about the workforce development issues and all of the things that we've talked about with education, but the other issues that we hear so often as legislators is that we have incredibly burdensome taxes, incredibly burdensome regulations. We have a permitting system that doesn't work, whether you have to deal with DEP or Labor and Industry or PennDOT. And you know, I know in our conversations in those late evenings at the Capitol, you know that I have often said that we don't exactly roll out the red carpet to business in Pennsylvania. But both you, Dawn, and Greg have been champions of regulatory reform and fixing the challenges that both businesses, individuals, local governments face, and that there's a package of legislation that's poised, sitting on the House floor. You've both been so instrumental. And Dawn, you have the REINS Act, essentially the REINS Act here in Pennsylvania. Talk to us about how you have a vision for the future of what regulation looks like here in Pennsylvania.
So I come at this with from a small business perspective as well. Having been a small business, my husband's a small business owner, really frustrated with the gauntlet of regulatory issues that we have in the Commonwealth. So, and it's the little things, and it's similar to what Warren said. So if someone doesn't show up, you're working overtime, you're filling that in. You don't have a whole, deep staff that you can dig down within. We are the janitor, we're the accountant, we're the bookkeeper. We do it all. So it's really frustrating when you have Labor and Industry coming in and saying, oh, well, your air compressor is now out of compliance because there's a new rule or whatever else it might be. And the response usually is, let's just one more form. Just, listen, you just fill out this form and you'll be good to go. What they don't take into account is the 100 forms that we're already completing. And every minute we spend on that is a minute we're not investing in the business. And it's a true financial impact, especially in small businesses. We just can't absorb it. So with that understanding, when I came into the legislature, that was my number one thing I tackled was we got to do something about the regulation. And my bill would require any regulation that an agency comes up with that has a financial impact of $1 million or greater must seek the approval or receive the approval of both the House and the Senate before it may be implemented. We took that one step further and amended it to how do you determine that $1 million? Because again, if we leave that to the state agencies, they'll interpret it however they deem. And so we would send it to the IFL to determine what the financial impact of that regulation is, to have an unbiased voice in there, doing something to rein in some of these regulations and get some more checks and balances in there. And additionally, I think we as legislators need to be a lot more concerted in our effort when we draft legislation. We need to be very specific so there is not this broad room for interpretation of legislation.
So you and I have talked, and the executive order signed by Governor Ridge that talks about twice a year they have to the governor's office public notices the numbers of regulations that the administration is working on. And it was pretty frightening, right? Right. So right. There were over 72 pages, almost 300 regulations in the works the last time we checked. What does that mean to a small business, to a large business, to a local government?
Well, I've got just a couple things came to mind. And everybody's to blame. It's not just the regulators, it's not the legislature, it's not just the governor. For instance, appeals to the Board of Revenue and Finance. To generate money, we decided to shorten the period you have to appeal from 90 days to 60 days. The only way that's a revenue generator is we've just made it harder for taxpayers to comply with the law. Slow walking permits happens all the time, whether it be a hearing for a denial in the Clean Air Act. They slow walk it because they don't want smoking anywhere. It's not the regulator's job to slow walk a permit to make it difficult to comply or stay open for business or to meet that appeal. We need to start thinking differently about our relationship with government. And we need to get upset when the government comes to us and say, we're going to generate revenue just by making it harder for you. You need to stop doing that. It's crazy.
Yeah. And the enhanced revenue collections effort that they do. I had at least, I had 6 businesses, small businesses within a 2-week period come to me with these form letters from the Department of Revenue that said, we don't believe that you submitted the proper amount of taxes. Based upon our review of similar businesses and their cash sales, yours didn't match. And so we believe that you owe more. Prove that you don't.
And prove a negative.
So, right. I said, wait, when they submit their taxes, they're signing an affidavit swearing that the information that they're submitting is accurate and that is truthful. And so this is coming back, robbing them really of due process, saying that you're guilty, prove you're not, with no premise whatsoever. So I had business after business calling in panic, bringing boxes of receipts and documents into my office, talking to a couple local accountants that said, oh, I can give you 20 more cases of this. And you call the agency and they say, oh, well, representative, this is something that we call enhanced revenue collection.
By third-party entities,
Yeah.
correct? Who profit
Absolutely.
by finding revenue, which really is just a license to harass
It's a
small businesses. Correct.
Well, when you drive down from Pennsylvania into Maryland, there's a sign when you enter Maryland that says open for business. And if you came back the other way, there ought to be a sign that says closed for business. I mean, under this governor and in this state, I mean, there is a mistrust between where the government bureaucrats do not trust the businesses of Pennsylvania to do the right thing. I mean, can you imagine, Dave Taylor and I were just talking about crafts, and so your child comes to you and says, I want to make something. And you're the parent, and it's going to be something they're going to make for you, and it's going to be beautiful and sweet and nice. You said, oh, wait a minute, get out the regulations before you create these jobs, before you create this nice thing. Are we making sure that we're not making people work overtime, or there's not environmental issues or safety issues, or I mean, this is the way that Pennsylvania treats job creators, whether it's a small business or a big business, is to say, we don't trust you. We don't trust you to do the right thing. And it's the most striking thing I've noticed since I've been in the legislature. Even in, I hate to say this, my own party, people who think that private sector businesses, they don't trust them. That someone who is going to make a product to sell to the community. I mean, we're all free market. We believe that if I make something that doesn't work, I'm going to suffer because no one's going to buy it again. But there are people in the progressive left who distrust the private sector and they distrust businesses, that you're really trying to hurt your customers. I mean, who would do that? And we know better. So the people who take the risks, the people who invest their own money. I mean, I use the analogy about a restaurant all the time. Like for what they go through to how we treat restaurants in this state. They're preparing meals for us. They're feeding our families. Thank you for taking a risk and opening up a business and buying the product and cooking the product and selling it to me so I can feed my family. But yet we treat businesses in Pennsylvania, and Warren's right, absolutely right. And there's this paralysis by permitting. My bill adds some transparency and says, if I apply for a permit, I should be able to go online and see where I am in the permit process. And there are statutory requirements that it be approved in a certain number of days. If it's not, tell me why not, and tell me why it's being held up. And then if it is being held up, then the person who's submitting the permit can go to a third party and get approval, which we do in all kinds of other areas of government.
Right. Because the current system is so broken that the only way a permit gets expedited is to call their legislator, right? We've become expert nags. we are really good at, you know, yanking things out of departments and agencies.
And they always get approved immediately after we call.
Correct. And
well, that's why you're here. We appreciate you.
Well,
I should say when I call.
what I can say on top of that is you're looking at 3 legislators who voted to reduce the size of the legislature, and I would bet that we probably could get consensus. We could reduce the amount of time we spend in Harrisburg and what they have to pay us.
I get to sit in between Dawn and Kristin on the floor. So, it's bad enough that Kristin's going to go to the Senate, but.
Actually, I'd like to touch on what Dawn was saying about the collection efforts. That's the first that I've heard of it, of course. And it kind of like smacks capitalism in the face because it negates the whole concept of competition. Yeah. So because your competitors are doing better than you and they made more money that year, you got to come in because you didn't report the right numbers.
Absolutely. And then you go back to the entrepreneurial spirit. So you take every contractor has to be registered with the Attorney General. It's $100 and you get a number now from the Attorney General. It does not demonstrate competence, that you know what you're doing, that you are a contractor. It's just to register them. And the thought process behind it was, well, we need to be able to track down contractors that are doing shoddy work or that are ripping off homeowners. Well, the ones that are ripping off homeowners, I'm sure, are not going to be registering with the Attorney General. So now you've added one more barrier for entrepreneurs. And it used to be if you lost your job, right, and you had some kind of skill, you could go pick up some odds and end jobs, whether it be plumbing or construction or whatever it may be, and support your family. And now you've got to have a permit from the Commonwealth. And then, what municipality are you going to be doing your project in? And you got to go through that municipality. And if you can determine that, does the county have anything? It's such a gauntlet that
remember,
you have to go through.
They have to be inspected, and it can only be inspected by the person that municipality selects, one person.
Absolutely.
Correct?
And once that inspection is done, if something happens, the municipality isn't responsible anyway. So what is the point of the whole process?
You should hear the arguments. And again, it's the progressives against third-party private companies doing a government job. Now, I've been in real estate for a long time, so I would be in meetings at PennDOT. We have PennDOT engineers and private sector engineers across the table from each other. They used to have each other's jobs. And so if I'm an engineer and I have my degree from Penn State Engineering, whether I'm working for PennDOT or I'm working for Gannett Fleming, what difference does it make? But you should hear they'll have a conflict. They're getting paid to do the job of the government person, as if they're different people. So I made a list one day of all the different third-party contractors that do types of inspections, including, by the way, every time you get your car inspected, you don't go to a government mechanic. Your kids, when they get vaccinated or when kids get their physicals for school, they don't go to a government doctor. And most recently, I'm thinking all the solicitors that work for all the local municipalities aren't government lawyers that work inside the municipalities. They're private sector attorneys. There's so much distrust of the private sector. If I'm doing inspections and I'm a private sector, what do I have to lose? Everything, my business, my family, my savings. If I'm a government bureaucrat doing inspections, what do I have to lose? You can't even lose your job in Pennsylvania because of the unions.
So I want to put this out to you. I want to get this conversation started. One of the things that I believe we could do so much better that would really enhance every Pennsylvanian's opportunity to pursue happiness would be to fix our finances. Pennsylvania's government takes too much money from people. We are not efficient, we are not effective, and we know that money in every average Pennsylvanian's pocketbook could do so much more to build this economy. Small businesses could create jobs. People could make decisions to spend money that would stimulate their local economies. Yet we continue to have a budget process where we're always asked to spend more. And we have a governor who continues to want to grow the size and scope of our government at the expense of middle-class Pennsylvanians. So, your thoughts, what can we do to fix the finances of Pennsylvania?
It's going to take courage. I was only there for a few months. We were in the first budget, and I had Republican leaders coming to me and saying, you can vote to raise taxes. You can vote for this budget. you'll still win your reelection. You're new. I said, I can't. My wife wouldn't let me in the door of my house. Like, what do you mean? I can't vote to raise taxes. But if you have all these people that are receiving a benefit, which we figured, 95% of it's not going back into the private sector, it takes courage to stand up to the people that are gonna see their money go less if we stop spending. But we have to. We can't continue to spend the money that we're spending. We can't.
I'd like to see the elimination of property taxes. Make more equitable across the board. I'd like to see that.
So talk about how that could empower Pennsylvanians by eliminating that property tax. Oftentimes, the conversation is that we're taxing our seniors out of their home. Absolutely. But it's not just our senior citizens who are impacted by that incredibly burdensome tax. It's young families, first-time home buyers.
Families, their first home. And then at the same time, many times in the urban areas, the real estate is not as expensive. So especially, we're seeing this in Harrisburg. We're seeing a renaissance, so to speak, in Harrisburg that, of course, Greg Rothman at one time was very instrumental in. And we're seeing this renaissance, but at the same time, the school district is not performing. The Harrisburg School District, at one time, they had a 38% graduation rate. The next time, they have like a 45% graduation rate. I don't know about you, but that's still an abysmal failure. So what happens is that these young people are burdened with, of course, home ownership. They have to pay for the taxes for a failing school district that they don't even send their children to. So on top of that, then they have to pay for private school education. So, of course, obviously, I'm going to look at it from an educational standpoint as well and the financing of that. But if you give those young people a chance, eliminate the property taxes, make it more equitable across the board. We can maybe increase the taxes on some other goods that clothing. We have a reduced clothing. Some of those other areas, I think that we can have a more equitable distribution. It would have a huge impact on a resurgence and growing of local economies and communities.
So recently, the state voters approved a ballot initiative, a constitutional amendment that has opened the door to allow us to look at different properties in different ways. Word on the street in Harrisburg is that there's interest in looking at homesteads and farmsteads differently than other types of property. What would that mean in Harrisburg?
As a primary homeowner, if it's a homestead, of course, it's your primary home in terms of residency, I think it would be huge for Harrisburg. It's a wonderful start. Obviously, it is the beginning. We have to start somewhere, and then we can build and grow from there. And I just think it's an excellent idea, an excellent concept. And of course, I'll pick up the phone if you need support in getting a move forward. I'm there to support all three of you in getting this initiative underway.
But the bigger picture is Harrisburg doesn't have a revenue problem. We spend too much money, and right? And I remember in 2007 or 8, I was running a real estate company, meeting with all of our agents at the beginning of the year and saying, hey, we're going to have to find places to cut. We found stuff that we were spending money on we didn't need to spend money on. The business continued to grow, but we knew that there were going to be economic pressures. There's never any discussion about cutting anything in Harrisburg. Anything.
It's absolutely taboo. So this summer, I was one of the members of the Common Sense.
By the way, give her a hand for that.
And we dug through, so when we were looking at the budget, and because we had passed the budget and the revenues weren't there, which I was guaranteed would be there once the Senate voted on something, we couldn't figure out where we were going to get the money. So let's take a cut across the board with the budget. And when we realized we couldn't get consensus on that, I said, I only see an additional $500 million in here that the Senate added. But I read in the bill, I said it was $900 million. So where's the other $400 million? And found that to be in an increase in special funds. So this is funds. There are 218 special funds that sit outside of our budget, or of our operational budget. These go unchecked. They're on account counted each year. If money is left in those accounts, it accumulates. It never goes back into the budget. And if you pay some of them, for example, the Keystone Fund is Parks and Rec. It's paid for out of a portion of the realty transfer tax. So if it's a good year in real estate, they might get more money, and then they can just spend more money. But what we were finding is that these funds were sitting on end fund balances for a minimum of 3 years. And then in addition, I guess the end fund balance would get to a point where it's so high, the treasurer would move it to a reserve account that yielded a higher interest rate. So they had 2 pots of money that they were not using. And when we attempted to take part of that and fill the budget gap from the governor's overspend, you would have thought that we were taking food off the table of babies. The pushback that we got was just absolutely shocking to me, because it was not a partisan pushback. It was, quite frankly, bipartisan. And this is where everybody kind of has a project or a deal in there, and nobody wants to give up any of those funds. But when we can't build our roads and bridges, why are we building a special trail from a new development to a park? I'm just thinking we need to prioritize our funding, and there is no such thing. And we need to get back to core spending with government. Core government functions is what we need to be prioritizing our funds for. And the rest, I'm not saying that trail is not a good project, but if the community wants it, let them come up with the resources to fund it. But why should the rest of the Commonwealth pay for it?
What Representative Keefer and Representative Mao from Adams County and their group over the summer, which I was a big supporter of, I wasn't intricately part of, but I supported. Can you imagine what it should have been a scandal? It should have been on the front page of every paper that government entities, bureaucrats, in the old days, they would rush to spend all the money at the end of the fiscal year so they could, use it or lose it, right? What they were doing was taking all that extra money and hiding it in a savings account, putting it in a savings account. Can you imagine someone who owes you money? That's your money. They're taking your money. We need more money. We need more money. And here they were putting it in a savings account.
And telling you
$7
that we
billion.
have to raise taxes.
What's that?
Right? We have to raise taxes.
We have to raise taxes.
That money is
$8 billion,
committed.
$7 billion.
Right. And saying that that money is all committed. It's not, you cannot touch any of those dollars. And it was interesting because the agencies then went to all of the recipients to get the fear factor going with all of it. So I started receiving calls from my county because we couldn't touch the recycling fund. If we were, it's going to ruin programs. And when Cumberland called me, I said, listen, you guys just canceled your large item recycling program. I could give every single county $1 million and not touch 1 penny of operational dollars, still leave a reserve amount in that account. I said, why are you calling me angry? Why aren't you angry at the agency and the program for not getting these dollars into the communities for the programs for which they were intended? But I got no consensus on that.
It's like giving my teenage daughter $20 to go to the movie, and the next night she says, well, I need money to go to dinner now. And I said, well, where's the money from the movie? Well, I don't know.
She put it in her bank account.
I'm going to go to the movie.
Just one quick thing. They said we couldn't do it. We couldn't touch this money. And what we get, 600 million?
300.
300 million.
Well, you could touch it.
So talk about the shadow budget. The Commonwealth Foundation coined that term, right?
Right.
So we spend how much?
So about 32 in our general fund budget, but in this shadow budget, there's over $40 billion that we spend. And trying to get traction on it, like they said, oh, you can't do it. You can't touch these dollars. Your transportation projects are going to come to a halt. This is going to stop and you're going to lose this. And it was such a ridiculous argument, but most of the public bought into it, including the newspapers. And so I started getting a little bit more strategic in it because I'm the researcher and I dig into all the facts. So as you know, I was creating all the spreadsheets, all the information, and going back and forth with the treasurer. It was next to impossible to get the information from the agency secretaries to do a drill down of what monies were committed, truly committed, and what wasn't. And we just, one of our members of the Common Sense Caucus, Seth Grove, took a lot of information from the multimodal fund, which is supposed to be mass transit, your buses, your SEPTA, air and rail is also in that. But, we were doing all kinds of pedestrian things, traffic calming, streetscaping that was in there. And of course, PennDOT saying every dollar is committed. They're sitting on over $500 million in surplus funds, but trying to convince us every dollar is committed. So we took that to the IFO and said, could you do just a drill down on the committed funds? And what they found was that fund was overcommitted by $180 million. So essentially what they do is they approve almost every project that comes in with an award process. But award doesn't mean committed, is what they explained to me. So you can be awarded, but then they're going to vet it out and see if you actually meet the criteria to get a commitment. This way they can always say that their dollars are committed. But how can you be overcommitted by $180 million there's got to be some more accountability and transparency. And it's difficult getting traction with additional colleagues and leadership to say, you know what, we demand it and we want it right now.
Completely agree. And I really enjoyed spending my summer with you. It was lovely. Warren, what would it mean to your small business, to all the small businesses at NFIB, if government could more efficiently and effectively use the resources that we already have without asking you for more?
Efficiency? Did you say efficiency?
That is our goal.
Wow. We just recently had an audit. It was a quarterly filing. The business owner didn't have the $200 to pay the bill. And because that went unpaid, they got audited for that quarter, for the year. The only thing at risk was $200 to the Commonwealth. They sent 2 auditors for a full day. I got the records from the client the day before. They're a complete mess, as most small business owners' records were. The auditor said, holy smokes, this is a mess. I said, welcome to my world. These 2 auditors spent the whole day for a no change audit, $200. Efficiency, we have a long way to go. We need to pick apart every agency and look at how they do business, how they're using third-party information. We live in an age of big data. I'm going to tell you something. Government's using big data now. The IRCA program, in a very meaningful way, is using third-party data to identify audit risks. Something as simple as a clerical issue. We had a business who, because of a rent dispute, moved locations, closed one company, started a new company on advice of counsel, but forgot to call their merchant account services. That's your credit card processor. They report that information to the IRS and the state. You get a report at the end of the year to say how many credit cards you processed. But because they didn't change the EIN, half of the income was appropriately reported in one company. The other half is appropriately reported in the other company, the new company. But they got flagged for audit because they're expecting all of the income to be reported on the first company. And just because they didn't send a paper to the bank saying we changed EINs, we have a new entity number for this EIN, you got flagged for an audit. That ended up being a 5-year audit. Under IRCA, they can go back to when the business opened. So efficiency, I don't see it. We need to pick apart every agency. We need to look at how they're using information, what they're doing with the information, and what the impact is. You know, every bill needs to be truly looked at. What's the impact and the cost to the business? And we're finding that that's not really happening. The IRCA program is generating revenue, and everybody's pleased with it. But what's the cost to the business community? This $200 audit, 2 auditors all day. What's the cost to the Commonwealth? We don't talk about that cost to the Commonwealth. We don't talk about the cost to the business. That probably costs $3,000 or $4,000 so the Commonwealth can get their $200, which would have been paid with a letter to the employer. The employer didn't so much as get a delinquency letter before the auditor showed up.
How about y'all remember when the Governor Wolf put a hiring freeze on and then immediately announced he had hired a state meteorologist?
Right.
Who had been the local weatherman on the local Fox News, which he could have, instead of paying $100,000 a year, could have just turned on television every day. And this past week, this past winter, we had 3 different occasions where the governor closed down the state and we didn't even have any snow. I mean, if you don't think there's money being wasted in the state of Pennsylvania, start with the meteorologist.
And not only that, we've become so much with computers and technology, right? We should need less manpower because things should be streamlined, but we're not losing any additional state employees. And like you said, you sent 2 auditors. Well, absolutely, because they're coming up with the new programs to justify their existence. Again, with my husband being a small business owner, we had labor and industry just show up one day, what I believe to be a fishing expedition because he has an inspection license. At that time, he's working his business and he works full time, so he has 2 jobs. And they come in and said, we want to look at your air compressor. It's like, okay, it's over there. He continues to work. And they said, well, sir, it's not compliant. I said, what do you mean it's not compliant? I just bought it 6 months ago. Well, there's a new rule, and you have to have a minimum gauge of 350 PSIs. And yours is only 250 PSI. Well, it's because it's a 250 PSI unit. That's what it came with the manufacturer. And I said, who comes up with these rules? And I believe it's you 2, because you need to justify your existence. And I think there's a lot of that. And you have a bill, I think, that would be, that's going to be a great one if we get through, hopefully, we do something productive, is it goes back So it's the repealer. It's going to go back. We have 153,000 regulations on the state books. And Kristin's bill would do a look back on all of these. Clean House, it's a 2-year, correct? It's a 2 year.
5 years.
It's a
5 years, yes.
Okay, so it's 5 years, but how long would the office of the repealer be there? For 5?
It would be for 5 years, and we amended it because we've seen great progress at the federal level with what the Trump administration has done with regulatory reform. We've adopted the concept for every new regulation that's going to be scrutinized by your foresight and legislation. We're going to get rid of 2 existing on the books.
And there's a cost to all regulations. In order to get licensed, up until probably 15, maybe 20 years, in order to get licensed as a barber, you had to have a hitching post in front of your establishment so the horse could hitch. So you ever wonder why you got those pretty little pole? It was a regulation. There's a cost to putting that in. You know, somebody's just cashed in their entire 401k and they have got it all in inventory, and now they've got this ridiculous hitching post they have to put out front. This is an example of absurdity. And, you know, this Trump administration regulatory thing actually isn't so extreme. You know, for anybody seeing this was borrowed from Canada. It started in a province. They did 2 for 1. It worked great. Mm-hmm. The rest of the Canadians said, hey, this is great stuff. They did 2 for 1. Now it's something less than 2 for 1 because I think things are humming along pretty good. Let's get rid of the hitching post regulation, okay? We can start there. And I think whether you're on the left or the right, Democrat, Republican, no matter how you feel, I think we could all agree these things have to go. Now, unfortunately for the inspector, maybe we don't need as many inspectors. Maybe we don't need as many pieces of paper to fill out. Maybe we can shorten the length from a 10-page health application to maybe a 5-page application. That is money.
Well, and those people are going to find jobs in businesses that belong to your organization because you will be creating jobs because the government won't be asking as much from you. And that would be a really magnificent thing. We have 1 minute left. So if there's any last word that you would like to say, I'm going to let you all have the last word.
Yes, last word is competition is good, ladies and gentlemen. And first, I got to give a shameless plug to Reach Foundation, Reach Alliance, because we specialize in school choice legislation here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And oftentimes, the left will often say that choice is a front against public education. I want everyone to know that public education is part of school choice. There are great quality public schools, but then there are also some that are not that great as well. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, representatives. It's been an honor to share this panel with you.
I was just going to say that the government burden on businesses and burden on all of us is, to me, economic freedom goes hand in hand with personal freedom, and we can't have personal freedom without economic freedom. So get the government out of our lives, get the government out of our business so we can be free to pursue our happiness.
And I would echo that, Greg. I think that the government overreaching that is personal choice and personal freedom. So, and Otto, like what you were saying, education also isn't one size fits all, right? So you should have the opportunity as a parent to choose what model of education is going to work for your child. And there's many paths to prosperity, right? There's many skills, and that's why we're paying plumbers and HVAC individuals $75 an hour to come out to your house because they're in high demand. Right. There's many paths, and we need to give families, small businesses, and our communities the freedom to choose what's going to work for those communities.
And the small business community wants a real partnership with the education system. We want, we'd love to see workforce development, regional workforce development organizations, much like Texas, to make sure that small businesses can go to places and get the resources they need to train and identify those young people who really want to work, show up for work. We want to make sure that we're able to train them the way we need them, not the way government needs to think that they need them, because quite frankly, the crop we have today, it isn't working. But if we work together in a real meaningful way, and we've got great examples all over the country, Texas, they took 23 education programs, condensed it to 13, pushed out that money to the workforce development organizations they have, partnered with local businesses. What do you need? How can we get you those people? How can we train those people? A real partnership. That's what we're looking for.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to each and every one of you for your commitment supporting the principles of limited government, personal responsibility, the pursuit of happiness, the path to prosperity for every person in Pennsylvania. Thank you so much.